Throughout the Third Reich and the Second World War, there were many makeshift execution sites established. The Nazis used different methods to execute prisoners, including inside of Germany they used a guillotine-style device called a Fallbeil. Across the nation, people were being guillotined to death for resisting Hitler and his government, but also there were large-scale hangings that took place inside of German cities and across occupied lands. Inside of these occupied countries, the Gestapo and other German agencies inspired a reign of fear into the people living inside of them to force them into submission. But inside the largest concentration camp established, there was an execution site created that was used to execute thousands of people. The Death Wall, as it was known, sat between blocks 10 and 11, which themselves provoked fear into the prisoners, and many would stand against it during the camp's operation, before they were then dispatched by a firing squad or a lone gunman. Join us today as we look at the brutal executions of the Death Wall of Auschwitz, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Auschwitz was the largest concentration camp established by the SS, and inside the huge complex over 1.3 million people were imprisoned within the barbed wire fences. It's believed that 1.1 million people at least were killed there, inside of the gas chambers and in other killings. The guards of Auschwitz were brutal and were known for their beatings of inmates, sometimes to death. There was one part of the camp which inspired as much fear as the guards of Auschwitz. Blocks 10 and 11 stood inside of the men's camp, and these two large brick buildings struck prisoners with so much fear that they would walk past quickly. Block 10 was where human experimentation took place inside of the camp, and inside there many doctors would conduct horrific experiments onto the inmates. Prisoners knew if they were summoned to Block 10, then there was a very good chance they would never make it out alive, as they would be infected with deadly diseases and then subject to different treatments, many of which were so potent that they would be killed. Also, many people were killed straight away by injections into the heart, but inside of the brick building next door, Block 11, there was also horrific punishment inflicted upon prisoners. Block 11 was the punishment centre of the camp, and here were many interrogation rooms and cells where prisoners would be investigated by the Gestapo and SS agents. Torture was administered inside Block 11, and many people were killed through the ordeals they were subject to within the building. There were also standing cells here, which were like tiny dungeons and prison rooms in which people would not be able to move or sit down, and they were held in these very cramped conditions for days on end, not being able to move or sit down. But next to these blocks was the Death Wall of Auschwitz. The Death Wall that stands today inside of the courtyard is a reconstruction of what it looked like, and this was an execution area. Many people were brought to Auschwitz from around Poland to be killed, and here many Polish people on behalf of the general government, who had been sentenced to death, were killed inside of Auschwitz on the Death Wall. To begin with, a firing squad near to the camp, where gravel had been taken from the ground, was used, and executions took place inside of these gravel pits. But from autumn 1941, the majority of executions by firing squad took place in the walled-off yard against the Death Wall. The first executions occurred there on the 11th of November 1941, with inmates being shot in the back of the head on Poland's National Independence Day. This was a huge mass shooting, and 151 Polish people made their way to the Death Wall one at a time, and they were forced to strip naked and then had their hands tied behind their backs. They were then told to stand against the wall, and then an SS executioner walked up from behind and shot them in the back of the head with a rifle. It was said that following this execution a Catholic Mass was held in memorial for the dozens killed in the barracks. Women were also shot on the Death Wall, and these were dealt with in the same manner as men, but were given some privacy to disrobe and undress in a separate room, near to the courtyard, before they were led to the wall, tied and then shot dead. Rudolf Höss, the commandant of Auschwitz, stated that execution orders arrived in an unbroken stream, and another SS officer stated that some of these walking skeletons had spent months in the stinking cells, where not even animals would be kept, and they could barely manage to stand straight, and yet at the last moment many of them shouted "Long live Poland" or "Long live freedom." Following the shootings, a group of prisoners known as the Sonderkommando would pick up the bodies and would then place them onto trucks or carts, before they were then taken to the crematoria and were disposed of. Many of the people who were taken to the Death Wall were never recorded on the camp's records, as they were brought specifically just to be killed, and because of this it's impossible to calculate how many thousands of people were shot dead there. Around 4,500 Polish prisoners were sentenced to death by the courts, and a significant number were shot after being taken to Auschwitz, and many Soviet prisoners of war were also brought in from outside prisons to be killed. It's estimated that thousands were killed on the death wall, and around 10,000 Polish people were taken to Auschwitz without being registered, specifically just to be killed and executed. Around 1,000 Soviet POWs died also in Auschwitz by execution, with many of these taking place on the death wall. The Polish government in exile stated that 11,274 prisoners and 6,314 prisoners of war were executed, presumably with most of these taking place on the death wall. This included many people who were suspected of being involved in the Polish resistance. The Gestapo would round these people up, then torture and interrogate them, before they were then sent to Auschwitz and were killed. Firing squads would also be assembled in the courtyard, and the concrete blocks in front of the wall were placed there to reduce ricochets following bullets being fired. On the 7th of October 1944, another mass execution took place against the wall, as 200 members of the Sonderkommando, those prisoners forced to collect the bodies and burn them inside the crematoria, were killed. They rose up against the guards in the Sonderkommando Rebellion and Revolt, and during this, one overseer was thrown inside of a furnace in the crematoria, and they then attacked the SS with stones and hammers, killing a number. But to deal with this, the SS went into overdrive, and they ordered mass executions of the Sonderkommando on the firing range. Also within the courtyard, floggings and whippings would take place, and prisoners could be heard screaming in pain from their punishment there, and it was known that over 25 lashes could be deadly. As mentioned inside of Auschwitz, other execution methods were used, such as hangings where gallows took the lives of many prisoners during roll call. The death wall was just one element of terror inside of the camp, where the SS inflicted horror onto the prisoners, and the thought of people going to their deaths there was a common one throughout the inmates' minds. It was a very scary and brutal part of the camp, sandwiched between the experimentation block and the torture block, and today the death wall is a horrific part of Auschwitz, in which thousands of people lost their lives against it. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.